If you're looking for an easy to propagate and grow plant that will give you variegation, fenestration, an occasional half moon, or an all white leaf, then I've got an update you might just be interested in. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Peggy's Plants, coming to you from Central Florida. Today I'd like to share with you the one-year update of my Epipremnum Pinnatum Variegata. About a year ago, I imported this Epipremnum Pinnatum Variegata from Indonesia. This is what the plant looked like at that time, minus a long stem that I decided to propagate. The long stem had several nodes but no leaves. Now, importing plants, your plant sometimes takes a turn for the worse when it's acclimating. So knowing that, I figured propagating this stem would give me some backup plants just in case things didn't go too well. So I chopped up the stem into individual nodes, put it on a bed of damp sphagnum moss, put it in a plastic container and put it in my grow tent. And in no time, these stems started producing sprouts. Within a month and a half, there were enough roots for these cuttings to be potted in soil. I mean, they really developed extensive root systems rather quickly. And they all did well, except for one, and that's this one here. And I'm sure you can see why. It's all white, so there's no green to aid in photosynthesis. But other than that, they all did well. Now, I ended up keeping 4 and I traded one, I gave away one, and I kept 4. Now these 2 center cuttings had a little bit of roots when I started them, so once they got going, they just took off and the leaves did too. And this is what my Epipremnum Pinnatum Variegatas look like today. They're all doing really well. These plants are so easy to grow and so easy to propagate. You get your fenestration, you get your variegation, and they are so much easier than dealing with Monstera albos. Take it from me, at least my experience has been. And then my Monstera albo has grown so slowly, and these have just been doing very well, at least most of them. So I'm going to show you some things about these plants and some things to look at if you might be interested in getting one of these plants. First, we'll start with taking a good look at the mother plant. As you can see here, I have the mother plant growing in hydrogen pellets, or leca as some people call them, and no specific reason, it's just easier for me, but it's doing well. And as you can see, this plant is growing like a weed. It has some of the original leaves. You do see the browning, which is typical on plants that have a lot of white, and the white on these plants is so white. The contrast is beautiful. See the fenestration here? And again, these 2 leaves you see here, the leaves you see with the fenestrations, those are original leaves, and they're still hanging in there a year later. Now, I did cut off some browning, so some of the leaves have been clipped and things like that, but this plant is doing very well. And based on my experience, if you get one of these plants and it has a lot of white and the leaves start browning and dying off, don't panic. I've been through that. When you change the environment, change the lighting, any of that, these plants are very likely to do that. And I have moved these from the house in the Keys to the house in Central Florida. It did react. And as you can see here, this yellow leaf, the new leaves come in yellow, and then over time they turn the bright white. And another tip is, if you plan on buying one of these plants, make sure you get a good look at the stem, because the variegation in the stem is going to have an impact on the variegation in the leaves. You don't want one that's all white or all green. You want a nice mix. Now let's take a look at the top cutting. All of the rest of the cuttings are potted up in soil. I had the mother plant in the hydrogen pellets, and all the rest are in soil. Like I said, no particular reason, and they're all doing well. Now, it looks like a chunky mix here, but it's actually regular potting soil that I did put some perlite in and some orchid bark because I had it on hand. Take a look at this plant. Now, this top cutting was the slowest to root, and it's the smallest, like more dainty. The leaves are very tiny, but it also has more leaves than any of the other cuttings. So I don't know exactly why that was, but it took forever to root. This was the last one to root. But as you can see, look at that variegation. Because this one started vining earlier than the other plants, I decided to put it on a moss stick, and it has actually attached itself to the moss stick. I don't wet it down or anything like that, but plants will attach to a wall, to anything. It doesn't have to be wet. Of all the cuttings, I think this has the best balance of variegation. Honestly, I was most concerned about the coloring in this stem because I felt like it had too much white, and it ends up with the most balance, so go figure. Let's move on to the middle cuttings. Now, they were the ones that rooted fastest. They had the biggest leaves. They came out the gates like gangbusters. And although they're growing well, they haven't kept up with the rate of the mother plant or the top cutting, but they're doing quite well. But they have taken me on a roller coaster ride. Look at the colors on this plant. Look at the number of white leaves. And some of these leaves have been on here for, months, very long time. And they're hanging in there. They're doing fine. But the stem just seems like it's getting wider and wider. So I may end up having to cut this. I'll just have to wait and see. But absolutely beautiful. But again, that's why you really want to take a look at your stem. But sometimes the stem, looking at the stem isn't enough, because if you see here, there's quite a bit of green on there. And it's like it alternates, giving me a mostly white leaf, then it'll give me a leaf that's mostly green. It'll throw out a half and half. This plant just does whatever it wants to. Beautiful, but it has been crazy. Look at this half moon. Isn't that beautiful? As you can see, it has a leaf about to unfurl. There's a lot of green on there, but there's a lot of white on there too. So I'm kind of anxious to see what I'm going to get. Like I said, this cutting has taken me on a roller coaster ride, but beautiful plant, doing fine, no trouble. And lastly is middle cutting number 2. Don't ask me what this plant is doing. It's doing exactly what it wants to. In the beginning, it was just putting out white leaves. They all died off. This has been growing in the same environment as all the others, but for some reason, this one is just doing whatever. It's growing much slower. It's had leaves that were dying off, but now it seems to have settled down and has given me some growth. But look at the amount of white in that stem. So I do have some concerns, but it looks like now it's starting to give me more green. Although this one here, I don't know, I think it was just being cute with me or something, but it's doing well. It's a healthy plant. I was never in fear of losing it or anything like that, but it started off great, and then it just kind of sat there while the other ones grew. So I guess with these plants, what I'm trying to say is Epipremnum Pinnatum Variegata, very easy to grow. I wouldn't hesitate to recommend this plant to a beginner. If you're after that Monstera Albo, but you don't want to put out that money and you want a highly variegated plant that will give you fenestrations and all these showy leaves, I would definitely recommend this plant to anyone. I do feel like it's as easy to grow as a pothos. And there you have it, my 1-year update on my Epipremnum Pinnatum Variegata. I absolutely love this plant. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.